Narayana, 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 Narayana. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatyai Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om Tat Sat. So as I have been mentioning about Vajrachedika Prajna Paramita Sutra, or what is popularly called as Diamond Sutra, wherein Buddha teaches about this sunyata, meaning having no real self separately in each phenomena, which is in direct opposition to the common usage of Atma in the Vedic texts. Though it is not accurate to say that they are opposed to each other, the literature available presents them as if they are opposing to each other. But with a little extra reading and study, or in fact even direct understanding, we'll come to know both point to the same thing. I will take this book, which I happen to get, an English translation. I have a few different translations of this, and this seemed very easy, so I wanted to read this one by Mo Song. In this, there is one appendix given where the English translation is presented in 15 pages. So I have left the portions of introduction and the commentary on it. It's not that important because we will easily understand by reading the text. So here we start. Om. The Diamond Sutra. Thus have I heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying at Anathapindika's garden in Jeta Grove in the city of Shravasti. With him was a large gathering of 1,250 monks and Bodhisattva Mahasattvas. Early in the morning, when the meal time came, the Buddha put on his robe and holding his bowl entered the great city of Shravasti, where he begged for food. Having finished begging from door to door, he came back to his own seat in the garden and took his meal. When this was done, he put away his robe and bowl, washed his feet, spread his seat, and sat down, mindfully fixing his attention in front of him. Then the Venerable Subhuti, who was among the assembly, rose from his seat, bared his right shoulder, set his right knee on the ground, and respectfully folding his hands, addressed the Buddha thus. It is wonderful, world-honored one, that the Tathagata thinks so much of all the Bodhisattvas and instructs them so well. World-honored one, in the case of a son or daughter of a good family who arouses the thought for the supreme awakening, how should they abide in it? And how should they keep their thoughts under control? This is the question by Subhuti. I repeat it. World-honored one, in the case of a son or daughter of a good family who arouses the thought for the supreme awakening, how should they abide in it? And how should they keep their thoughts under control? So it obviously means, how should they continue and persist with this intention to awake, number one. Number two, to be able to achieve that, Subhuti himself says that the thoughts needs to be under check. How should he do it? How should the seeker do it? That's a question by Subhuti. The Buddha replied, well said, indeed, O Subhuti, as you say, the Tathagata thinks very much of all the Bodhisattvas and instructs them well. But now listen attentively, and I will tell you how those who have set out on the Bodhisattva path should abide in it, and how they should keep their thoughts under control. So here the instruction is about a Bodhisattva. A Bodhisattva is one who is intent upon his own awakening or her own awakening and is also committed to delivering it to more people. This is different from the aim of a nirvana of an arahat, the worshipable. Arahat means the worshipable, who has crossed all his own limitations and is free. But he is not capable or not committed to teaching many others, though they may do, but that was not their original intent. Whereas a Bodhisattva is the one who is committed to awakening others. If a person is of that commitment, how should he check his own thoughts? How should he behave? This is what is being pointed out. I will tell you how those who have set out on the Bodhisattva path should abide in it, and how they should keep their thoughts under control. So be it, world-honored one, I wish to listen to you, Subhuti said. The Buddha said to Subhuti, all the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas who undertake the practice of meditation should cherish one thought only. When I attain perfect wisdom, I will liberate all sentient beings in every realm of the universe, whether they be egg-born, womb-born, moisture-born, or miraculously born. Those with form, those without form, those with perception and those without perception, and those with neither perception nor non-perception. So long as any form of being is conceived, I must allow it to pass into the eternal peace of nirvana, into that realm of nirvana that leaves nothing behind, and to attain final awakening. Here he described all the different forms that are born. We say womb born, like the human beings or the animals, or the moisture born, or egg born, like the birds, or the miraculously born, like the devas. It is said the devas are not born by conception in the mother's. They are born, they appear in the divine realms, just like that. Or those with form or without form. Because it is a Buddhist explanation, and in fact the meditations following this trend about worlds with forms, worlds without forms. Arupa worlds, as they say. Arupa. What we are is a kama loka. Means we are bound by kama or desire that we come here. Then only with the form, then without the form, then worlds with perception, worlds with no perception, worlds neither with perception nor non-perception. So these are the different worlds, and there are corresponding meditations which give one the experience of those worlds. These are defined as jhanas in the Buddhist tradition. We will get the same thing even if you go in the path of Patanjali Yoga, etc. There may be different rungs that are described by both. You also have another literature called Dashabhumika, 10 stages in the Bodhisattva path. They also basically try to describe in different ways the same experiences. And then commit to them that they will also be helped by me to attain nirvana. That is my commitment as a bodhisattva. So this is the only thought that needs to be entertained by a bodhisattva. That's what Buddha said. And yet, although immeasurable, innumerable, and unlimited beings have been liberated, truly no being has been liberated. Why? Because no bodhisattva who is a true bodhisattva entertains such concepts as a self, a person, a being, or a living soul. Thus, there are no sentient beings to be liberated and no self to attain perfect wisdom. So as I said, here the teaching is by paradoxes. Advancing an idea and immediately checking it. I remember a sentence in the conversations of U.G. Krishnamurti, where somebody said, because U.G. was very controversial, very difficult to understand also many times, and will not let you, rest in any concept. Of course, he sometimes ridiculous, as well you can say. You get fed up and sick. So difficult is his usage of words, and he trashes everything. It's good if somebody is able to be patient with it and come out of any concepts. It helps. But definitely it will create an aversion and distaste for many, I am sure. I too experienced that. Same way, Buddha is doing the same trick. One needs to really follow. Here he described about the commitment of a bodhisattva to liberate every living being. And immediately the next paragraph he says, and yet, although immeasurable, innumerable, and unlimited beings have been liberated by the bodhisattva, let us say, truly no being has been liberated. What is this? Buddha is saying the bodhisattva is committed his eons of life to liberate beings who are stuck, and now he says, truly no being has been liberated. Why? He is asking a question. And he answers, because no bodhisattva who is true bodhisattva entertains such concepts as a self, a person, a being, or a living soul. Because the fundamental teaching here is the self which is being pushed till now is very individual. And the concept of the bodhisattva teaching is that there is no individual soul. So if a bodhisattva really thinks that there are individual selves or soul or beings or persons, and he is committed to liberating them, means he has not really grasped the idea of a bodhisattva, whose beginning stage is to know that he is not a limited soul. That is a mistaken notion. So even though apparently many people or many persons or many living souls are liberated, he knows truly no real soul existed even to liberate, even to entertain the idea of liberating or freeing them. Because there really never was an individual tangible soul except for the empirical false notion of a soul. Thus, there are no sentient beings to be liberated and no self to attain perfect wisdom. What was the notion? It was the Bodhisattva wanted perfect wisdom. But is there really an individual soul which could attain perfect wisdom? No, because this is against the initial premise and also the final understanding. So the idea of entertaining this practice of a bodhisattva or a saint to attain perfect wisdom is also at the time of a wrong notion that there existed a separate living soul or a person or a being or a self. This is the statement of Buddha. So even though the teaching of a bodhisattva is being given, the undercurrent is to deny this individual notion of a karta, of becoming a revealer or a savior to anybody. If one embarks on this with the notion that he will be a savior, he has defeated the purpose of the initial shraddha in the teaching, based on which how one is to behave as a bodhisattva. And the final understanding stands in opposition to this idea that I will become a savior. That balance has to be made. Has to be always at the top of the mind. You work denying your own existence as an individual self. This transaction is an impersonal transaction. With that understanding, you work about. So the work, even though it is said I am going to help sentient beings, that is actually a denial of one's own individual self. That is the practice. This is the one goal, as Buddha said in the beginning. Furthermore, Subhuti, in the practice of generosity, a bodhisattva should be unsupported. He or she should practice generosity without regard to sight, sound, touch, flavor, smell, or any thought that arises in it. Subhuti, thus should be a bodhisattva practice generosity without being supported by any notion of a sign. Why? When a bodhisattva practices generosity without being supported by any notion of a sign, his or her merit will be beyond conception. Subhuti, what do you think? Can you measure the space exceeding eastward? So that is a context to the next paragraph. So let's confine here, which is again a difficult one. The Bodhisattva inculcates 6 paramitas. Means the purifying means. First one being dana, charity. So a bodhisattva is committed to charity. Charity to support anybody in the path of dharma. To attain dharma in the sense, to attain peace, objectless peace and joy. To show them the way. He helps them to overcome their hardships. He motivates them. Here, dana need not mean simply giving physical objects only, though it is included. But when the dana is given, you are not going to take help of any reason. You are not going to justify. You are not going to calculate based on things, based on sight, for example. Oh, this man looks poor. this man doesn't look poor, and I make a judgment and then do charity. That is not as good as doing charity disregarding the looks. Because we are trying, if somebody does that, by look he measures, he makes a judgment, and then he gives to one and he does not give to the other. Then he is measuring individuals. He is identifying individuals. For example, I say, this man looks ugly, he has done sin in the past life. This man looks beautiful, this man looks deserving, so he is done punya. It is not what is apparent in these words, but the notion behind it in our mind, that there is something called punya and there is an entity which has done punya or papa, merit or demerit. That entity, the notion of an entity, has already corrupted my own vision of a bodhisattva whose fundamental teaching is there is really no self. Individually. So only by giving up this attention to this lack of individual self can you make a mistake of identifying and supporting your dana or charity based on sight. Sight meaning how it looks. What is seen. So you do charity being supported by sight, by the shape or a form or a color, by the sound. For example, the beggars. Somebody may be begging, using words in Hindi. Somebody may be doing it in using Telugu words. Then immediately a notion comes. This fellow must have come from northern India or southern India. I have created two individuals with their individual identity, a soul. I may do favor or I may do something against their favor. That is immaterial. But immediately the notion of an individual self or an individual soul or a being or a person has come in my mind. So when a bodhisattva does charity with that view, the merit is already diminished than doing charity without being supported by the words that were uttered. Look at another example. We take a sankalpa at the time of dana, a vow, and then do dana or charity. A truly compassionate bodhisattva would not care for that. He moves without the notion of an individual self or a soul or a person or a being and then does charity. Whereas, even in the Hindu tradition we have, you must do charity by taking sankalpa. You are reinforcing the notion of an individual within yourself that I am doing this charity. That is detrimental to your ultimate goal of giving up the selfhood, which is limited. So Buddha is saying that your actual dana is meritorious only when it is not accompanied by a selfhood in two places. Either the receiver of charity or the giver of charity. If at that conjuncture there is no sign, there is no selfhood. So when you are able to discard selfhood in all the worldly transactions, what remains is that oneself. This is what is Buddha emphasizing. The word sign also means something more important. Called nimitta. You do charity in in full moon, or you do in no moon. And if this notion is carried in one's heart and says today is only the 14th day, tomorrow is full moon, I will do. Meaning you have attributed an essence to that full moon, to that no moon, the nimitta or a sign. So the result is dependent on that. You have attributed a selfhood to that, as if a full moon is going to be having an essential soul or a self or a body or a being or a person within that something called no moon or a full moon. Truly. Which is not the case. Because we know it is just a coincidence of circumstances that the earth and the moon revolve, and some days it is called full moon, sometimes it is called no moon. Truly, there is no selfhood in that no moon or full moon or any other tithi. It is just circumstances. They are dependent. Because if something happens today, after 14 days something else is going to happen. Exactly same thing. So, there is really no need of a person or a selfhood for this 15-day pattern to repeat. It just happens by nature. Discarding this truth, if somebody were to hang on to a dharma, such as a no moon, or another dharma called as a punya, and another dharma called as charity or a charitable disposition, and gives importance to that and undermines the ultimate goal of seeing everything as Brahman, that is being defeated by having these supports. I repeat it. Furthermore, Subhuti, in the practice of generosity, a bodhisattva should be unsupported. Unsupported means unconcerned. Unconcerned about any phenomena. Freely generous. No judgment. That's what it means. No evaluation. No calculation of a right time or right place, right way, etc. In that free state of mind, free from any notion of individual soul or a body or a being or a self, true generosity takes place. He is the right bodhisattva. He is the right saint. That's what Buddha is saying. He or she should practice generosity without regard to sight, sound, touch, flavor, smell, or any thought. Let's stop up to this. Meaning all the physical characteristics have no self. That is the idea. Do not take support or be concerned with sight, touch, sound, flavor, smell. Meaning all the jnanendriyas that we are using. And the inputs. Do not depend on those. The gnana that is coming from the jnanendriyas, do not depend on them for your generosity. Otherwise, you will be creating a being in those. This also means in the Buddha Dharma, they say 5 heaps. All our experiences are in these 5. Wherever I know anything comes into these 5 groups of knowledge. Sense of touch, smell, sound, shape, or flavor or taste. So wherever the notion of I is coming, is only coming in these 5. And the 6th one being the mind, and we'll come to that later. So you need to not associate yourself with these 5 heaps. called skandhas. Skandha, panchaskandha. If you can do charity disconnecting from these panchaskandhas, 5 heaps or 5 groups of sensory knowledges, you have not identified yourself with this person. Then your action is impersonal. When you perfect an impersonal activity, then you are truly approaching knowledge. This is what Buddha is emphasizing here. We will continue again. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sarvam Sri Krishna Arpanamastu. Sri Buddha Charana Arpanamastu.